Hi, welcome to Sipping Tea with Sabrina. In just a second, we are going to be sharing the tea on creating a federal advocacy strategy. But if you've never met me before, my name is Sabrina Walker Hernandez, and I'm the founder of Supporting World Hope. It's a company I started after 25+ years in the nonprofit industry, and I help nonprofits and small businesses build relationships that increase revenue. And so also I am a keynote speaker and I'm a master trainer, and the services I provide are around board and fund development and strategic planning. And we have with us today, very happy about this. We have with us today Ron Hamm from Hamm Consulting. Let's welcome him to the stage. Hi, Ron. How are you doing?
Good morning, Sabrina. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for being here. I'm very
Yes.
happy that you're here because understanding federal relationships is critical for small nonprofits, and it unlocks the secret to substantial funding opportunities and policy influence, enabling them to expand their impact. And effective advocacy is something that we need to help, to secure some federal funding, some financial resources at the federal level, policy changes, establish some partnerships, and it really can directly affect a nonprofit's mission and the community as a whole. And so, before we get started, guys, I want you to click the heart and the like buttons. I know that you can hear me loud and clear. That's going to help with any of the algorithms across the platforms. Ron, I'm going to ask that it says here, I'm streaming on three platforms, so everybody know, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And it says we're having trouble streaming to Facebook. So I am going to remove and re-add Facebook. So that might just delay us a little bit. But as we do that, let's go ahead. So we are reconnecting to Facebook, guys. We are back on Facebook. Perfect. So, Ron, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, Sabrina, thank you for having me as a guest this morning. I really look forward to talking to all the people that are listening. I am originally, of course, from the great state of North Carolina, but have went on from North Carolina to California, where I was involved in politics out there on the local level, city and county. Then I moved back here to Washington, D.C., where I've served as a federal lobbyist for about 28 years. A lot of the work is focused on really nonprofits in the municipal world as well as the higher education world. So I've had a chance to work with many people in Congress. As a matter of fact, I started working when President Clinton was president. So I've seen a number of administrations from the Clinton administration all the way up until the present Biden administration. So throughout those years, built relationships on Capitol Hill and within the federal agencies, and have had to have transitioned through those particular relationships over the years. The other thing too is my focus has really been on getting or helping my clients secure federal investments. I don't like to call them, handouts or anything. It's basically your tax money that you deserve to come back into your community to have an impact. So I've worked on that. And in terms of the funding, the areas have been grants, federal grants, as well as federal appropriations, where members go in and get an appropriation for something local. That's called an earmark.
Yes, which I hope is back, which is good.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know
So
if they technically ever went away, but they're back.
yeah, they are back, and I am deeply involved with those for a number of clients. And then the other thing too is, what are the policies that are favorable to your goals, and that are policies that will hurt you? So I often monitor those kinds of things for clients, as well as what legislation do we need to again make a difference in our communities. So again, I've been around this for a very long time. I think in 2020. I was recognized as one of the top lobbyists in Washington, D.C. for that year. So I say all that to say none of that is possible without the people that I work with. And you know what, without the folks on my team and the folks that I work with on Capitol Hill in the federal agency. So I look forward to talking about sort of the processes we use and maybe how you can be more effective in your federal advocacy. So
Yes.
thanks again, Sabrina.
Yes, no, I'm so happy that you're here. So I promise anybody who comes on this stage that we 45 minutes ish because they're all so busy, right? So we're going to get to the
Mhm.
questions. And so I have a set of some questions, and as people are watching, I navigate between the different platforms to see if there's any questions, and we'll do those at the end. So navigating the federal landscape for small nonprofits with limited resources, advocacy can be daunting. So, how can they effectively navigate the federal landscape to advance their causes and secure funding?
Yep, excellent question. One of the things I will say is when you look at this, people often think, well, Congress doesn't really care about our interests. I think if you took a poll, I think it's about 11% of citizens actually believe members of Congress will care about their interests. I can see why when you see the news every day, government shutdowns and the back and forth partisanship. But I would say probably the vast majority, or maybe 95% of those folks in public office really on Capitol Hill, they actually value hearing from their constituents, staying in touch with them. So one of the things I would say is, and people often equate big time advocacy with hiring big lobbying firms. And I'm not trying to put myself out of business, but there's a way if you are on a tight budget, yes, you could hire someone to do that. But I think the first thing you really have to do is build relationships. You
Yes.
have to build trust. You have to really clearly articulate what is your mission? What are your goals? What are your priorities and objectives? And then from there, you really need to target, where you want this focus to be in your advocacy. Is it your congressional delegation, your House members and senators that represent you? Is it a federal agency, the Department of Education, the Department the Higher Education Division? Maybe they're partnerships. Is it Department of Labor? You need to get to know a program manager because your mission, your objectives could be tied to the program that has the monies for you to do those things. And I always tell people when you go in and here in Washington, it's really about selling. So you really need to develop an agenda, and then you need to develop a strategy to execute that. That could be as simple as these are my top three things based on the goals and objectives of my organization. These are the top three things we want to achieve. We need $1 million of funding to do X, Y, and Z. We need legislation to advance this particular policy issue that impacts the people we serve. Or we need a regulation tweaked so that it will allow us to do more. So I think the first thing you can do this locally is to clearly identify what you really want to accomplish. The
Right.
other thing is you can communicate with your congressional offices there on the ground. I think I hate that the pandemic happened,
Right.
but it's really shifted the paradigm in terms of communication. You don't
Right.
have to fly into Washington to always meet with folks. There's something called MS Teams. There's something called Zoom. So you could set up meetings for them to tour your facilities, for them to walk the community with you. And I will tell you this, people also have the misnomer that I got to see the congresswoman. I have to know them. No, you don't. You need to know the staff.
The staff makes the
End of
decisions.
the day, the staff is driving the decision. So a lot of the strength of my decisions are strength of relationships, I'm sorry, are with the staff. Yeah, I know the member, but the member gets bombarded every day with hundreds of people, hundreds of messages. So you want to make sure you build those strong relationships and build trust. And I would say the other thing too is if you really want to have a strong advocacy strategy, whatever you bring to them, make sure that it's credible, make sure that it's outcome based. And my God, if you can support it with data
Yes.
and outcomes, that's what they're after. And I'll say, think about this. The members here, the majority of them, they want wins. So if you have a winning program or a winning service, they would love nothing more than to be at a groundbreaking or to be at a ribbon cutting or to be at some precedent that you've made a difference in their
Yes.
congressional history. So I say all that is pretty simple. And my other key things before we move on is I would say relationships that you have. So if you have stakeholders, community, folks that you can rely on, use them to expand your support. Hey, maybe they're friends with the congressman's wife or their son or their child. utilize all those relationships. I utilized one with a professional football player, famous one as a matter of fact, Hall of Famer. We needed to get something done in Alabama. He was close to the senator, so I had no fear in calling him, but I also prepared him with the right message to deliver so that
Correct.
they were very clear in terms of what we need. So I think of that. And the other thing, you never can say thanks enough to folks who help you, and always follow up. So if you were to have a visit with them, make sure you follow up with a note of thanks. Maybe you want to follow up with more detail about a project that you're seeking. So at the end of the day, a lot of the action falls on you,
Hmm.
but if you can get them to buy into what you want, if your goals are aligned with what they're trying to accomplish in Congress, you will have success.
Yes. And so I ran a small nonprofit.
Mhm.
My budget started out at
Mhm.
750K and we went to 2.5, but I believed in going and reaching out to elected officials.
Mhm.
Not a question here, but this is something I think that needs to be talked about. A lot of times, the advice that you're giving, I will tell people, this is what you need to do. And they go, I don't want to play politics.
Okay.
How do you address that?
Well, I say, are you really trying to make a difference? Do you believe in what you're doing? Because it can be above politics. Honestly, a lot of things that nonprofits do, small, they're actually I say they're nonpartisan.
Yes.
They're about making the lives of people better, making the community better. It's about positive outcomes. So you take the politics, and if you meet with a Republican or a Democrat, you don't have to go in and declare what your politics are. It's issue based. Forget the politics. And in dealing in a lot, because most of my clients are not in the nonprofit world. They're their governments. We always go in and say, hey, this is what's good for your community. We take out the Democrat or the red and the blue. And I think people get so hung up on that. I have clients who say, well, I don't want to be involved in politics. I said, that's not the message we're here to deliver. We're here to deliver that you're doing great work that is deserving for consideration of a federal investment.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
That is a good way to look to look at it, because it's the pushback that is often talked about, and I'm like, you're missing the ball. So thank you for saying
That's
that.
right. You're welcome.
So you mentioned also like identifying different policies or
Mhm.
different offices that you need to navigate. How
Mhm.
can a small nonprofit identify the most strategic federal priorities and initiatives that align with their mission and funding needs?
So I know here in Washington, so I'll give an example from the way I work. So this morning, I was supposed to attend an event with other lobbyists for counties across the nation.
Mm.
So lots of times, I look at, if I'm representing local governments, who are the big stakeholders or advocates, bigger global advocates here in Washington that can help. I want to align with those people because they're following everything my clients are interested in. So whether there are other nonprofits or industry groups, even community groups, lots of times they have advocacy groups in Washington at the state level, because I
Right.
never want to leave out the state. I think they're important too.
Yeah.
But I'll say typically, if you can find, folks within, and I shouldn't say industry, within your realm of the work that you're doing, you could sort of lean on them. The other thing too is, okay, I have members of Congress. These are the things that I care about. So John, who works for, Senator Cornyn in Texas, these are our issues. I would like for you to track opportunities for those. I
Okay.
say that to say that's why I said it's important to identify your priorities and objectives, because John may then say, okay, we have the list of things that this group is interested in. Well, man, I need to track the legislation sponsored by Majority Leader McCarthy and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries on this particular issue. So they
Okay.
can start to help you with that. Often I find that, because I built these relationships, I will get stuff from people all over the hill to say, hey, this bill is going to be introduced. I just had one on housing, supportive housing and wraparound services. We have a homelessness problem in this country.
Yes, we
My
do.
clients are very interested. So, of course, I had a Hill person say, hey, this is a bill my boss is dropping in the Senate. And, can you get your senators involved? So think about this. If you were to find out something from your House member that there's some legislation that would support what you're doing, you then are useful. They may say, hey, can you help us get these other people signed on. Who else do you know in your universe that has a member on that committee that might be interested in this? So it sort of comes into play there. I mean, I can tell you there are resources like congress.gov, you can,
Right.
those kinds of things. So if you were interested in stem cell research, you could go in and research that, and that would show you all the bills, all the sponsors of folks. And then you could see if your members are sponsors, and if they're not, or co-sponsors, you might want to get on the phone or get on email or meet with their district office and say,
Mhm.
hey, this bill is out there. This is something we're interested in. Regulations are a little bit harder, although there's something called the Federal Register that they publish almost daily that's searchable online. You
Mhm.
can go there. So if there's a regulation against how a nonprofit would spend its money or some
Right.
accounting rule that could be harmful, you should be able to find that. But that's where it sort of becomes, people pay me to do that stuff.
Right.
So it depends, if you had someone on staff and you had wanted to assign those duties to them in a very limited fashion, you could do, a small nonprofit could do that. But I'm honest, I would leverage my relationships based on the things that I'm working on, because maybe there's the association of profits for ABC that you
Right.
can maybe get to, but a lot of it would need to be, it can be done in-house, I think, on a simple level, because you can make it really complicated about what rule is there to take up this, but you don't want to get into all that. You really want to get into where are the opportunities for my organization. That's what it comes to.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that's what you want to
Yep.
know about. Where
Mhm.
are those opportunities?
Yep. And you
So
elect, remember, you elect people to Congress to help you do those things.
exactly. So why don't you want to play politics?
Right. Exactly.
It's not a bad
Exactly.
word. It really is not a bad word.
No.
So you mentioned that you started to go into some steps that small nonprofits can do, but could you share some practical steps that
Mhm.
small nonprofits can do to develop effective, federal advocacy strategies,
Mhm.
especially when they might not have dedicated government relations team?
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things I would suggest, and we do this for clients, but it frankly, if I'm running a small nonprofit, again, public policy, that's what we're aiming for. Again, you want to identify, okay, these are my three, you may have 5 issues that I'm really,
Mhm.
really interested in. Okay, I am going to articulate those. Maybe I'll have an outline or a chart that has these things, but behind those, I want a one pager that's simple to understand. That's a quick read, because people on the Hill don't like reading books.
Right.
So what you would want to do then is, once you identify those, you want to build out those with one page documents. You then want to look at potential targeted funding resources. However, you could actually say, hey, Mr. Congressman, Mrs. Senator, these are things I'm interested in just a one page chart with those, with what those issues are and what you want those outcomes to be. If you were to get, if these things were to advance with their help in Congress, you would do that. But I would each year give them a list of my priorities. It
Okay.
doesn't, yeah, each year. And needs. I mean, if you have a $10 million need for things, I will let them know that, because basically they say, hey, okay, you've identified your priorities. Maybe we can help you identify targeted funding sources. And so then from there, you are giving them work, because I always tell people, we used to yell and scream about they don't do anything in Washington. We don't do anything to hold them accountable. We
No.
don't give them any work to make them accountable to us. So that's what I would do. And then I think once you get to that, you deliver that. Honestly, I would at least, bare minimum, well, start off in the district office in
Yes.
person, meet with those folks, have them come to your offices. Sometimes they take congressional recesses. They're in the district, so they might be, well, actually, I think it's actually a good idea to get them on your ground.
Yeah.
And then you sit down in a room and you give these. I would do that like early on in the year, like January. And the reason I say that is because in February, March, they're asking for funding requests for appropriations for earmarks,
Hmm.
which they call congressional directed spending, community project fund. But you want to get this to them ahead of that, so that when they send the form out in March saying, hey, or February saying, we're accepting funding proposals, and these are the accounts we're accepting, and this is what we do. You already have talked to them, so they have an idea of what you're doing. Then, if you do have any money in your budget, or maybe there's a conference in DC that you may be coming to, or maybe it's something in your state where they're going to be, you need to meet with them in person if possible. Again, there is Zoom, there's MS Teams. So if
Yeah.
you can't make it to Washington, No worries. They're more than happy to do those meetings. But I think you can't just email it. You have to put a face to
Face
this.
to it.
So you have to spend, and I'll tell you, typically your listening period for these folks is 15 to 30 minutes. So you gotta know
15.
what I'm talking about.
Don't even say 30, because then
Yeah,
people try to take
yeah,
35, 40. They don't have that kind of time.
yeah,
15.
exactly. So I think that is sort of the strat, and always have this in mind. I want to present a case that helps advance the member advance his goals. So what is he interested in that I'm interested in that might align? What is this pin that he's wearing on his lapel? Oh, he's part of this caucus. Well, that caucus, that, that congressional caucus supports the things we're doing. So
Mhm.
you got to look at all those little those small things, and a lot of times you can get that from from their staff. I would say on the agency end, agencies are more than happy to do webinar. They do webinars. They're more than happy to do Zooms and MS Teams. So if you're researching a program that deals with criminal justice reform, for
Mhm.
instance, you research that, you see what agency, there are probably going to be grants through that agency that might advance your cause. Or sometimes it's really more about having them get to know you. So
Right.
you might not, as I tell clients, we're not walking out with a briefcase full of money today, but we are building a relationship. We are educating them on what you're doing. So it's not, I always tell you, it's not overnight. It takes some work, and it takes some sustained work. So if you're willing to do those things, you could do this on your own, but I always say you got to keep it simple. You don't want to make it complex. There's no
Right.
need to be complex.
Right. I'm going to recap this for folks because I know my people and they try to make things complicated. So I
Hmm.
heard some very clear deliverables.
Yeah.
Reach out to the district office.
Yep.
When you reach out to the district office, set up a meeting, have them come on site to
Yep.
where you provide the service.
Hmm.
Best time to do that is in January. When
Yes.
they come on site, you have your one sheeter that has your three priorities,
That's
and
it.
you start establishing the relationship because the money gets announced about February, March.
Yep, they're going to start Yep, they're going to start asking, "Hey, here we go. If you want money, you need to turn this in." And I know Congress is hung up on the shutdown approach thing, but you see, I don't worry about that stuff. I just want to make sure my clients have their stuff in the hopper. So
Yeah,
when those decisions are made, we're in the game. So
yeah.
that's the way you have to. The other thing too is if you have a service provider or you're partnering with people, they love that. Make sure they're in the room, invite them, because when they come in, they're like, okay, there are more people investing. It's just not you telling me this. Oh, you have partners here. You never know who those partners may know, or they start connect. Oh, John, yeah, I know him. We know. I'm telling you, a lot of this stuff gets done by relationships. So
Okay.
good
Okay.
paper, good proposals are your ticket to the dance, but you've got to put the energy in your relationships.
In the relationships. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Okay. So, um, this is so good. Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of small nonprofits are not even aware of the resources that are available. Like you're
Mhm.
saying, in February,
Yeah.
March, it becomes available. So they're not even aware of that. So,
Mhm.
what advice do you have for them to identify and secure, that type of funding opportunities that align with their work?
Okay. Yeah. So what I would do typically, there are announcements that come out. Number one, I would stay close to my congressional member, my House member, and my Senate members. And you could say, hey, we want to know when, and I can send you something on this. You want to know when you're going to start to accept funding requests for the FY25 appropriation cycle, because they're working on 20. So it's 25. Because remember, right now we're 24, but the fiscal year just ended here for
Right. September
23.
30th. Oh,
Yeah.
in a couple of days.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the problem why we could be shut down.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, so you want to do that because they're willing to get on their mailing list. First things first, go to their website, get on their mailing list. But I'm telling you, put a tickler on your a date on your calendar, like early January, to say I'm reaching out to these people to find out when you will be accepting FY24 funding requests. I would just FY25 funding requests, and they'll put you on a list and they'll send it. They will send you that information. And now that can be daunting because it could be a ton of questions. But what I say, if you don't have someone working for you like me, you need to set up meetings with their staff and say, hey, I want you to help me do this, and they'll advise you on the best way to do it. I don't know if they're necessarily completed for you, but they will give you the answers and they may give you some I would say, some flexibility in how you respond to some of those questions. But yes, I would get on every mailing list for every congressional member representing me that I could.
Okay, that's perfect. So, hi, if you're just joining us, welcome to the broadcast. I just want to say that we're currently talking about creating a federal advocacy strategy, and we just covered a very clear timeline. So, if you're just joining us, I want you to go back and watch this because this is key. This is one of the key points that helped me take my organization from the 750 to the 2.5. You can do this. And Ron is the expert in this. And he has graciously said yes to my invite here. So I'm milking it for all I can. So you keep talking about relationship building. It's
Yep.
one of my mantras. That's what I do. I help nonprofits build relationships.
Mhm.
So relationship building on Capitol Hill and with federal agency, I know is crucial. So how can small nonprofits with limited time and resources strategically advance their connections with key decision makers in the federal government? I know you said start with the district, invite them in, do it that way. Is there anything additional that they can do to advance those relationships?
Yes, I think the other key to this too, we have congressional committees here. So for instance, I have a nonprofit client and they had not been doing any of this. So they hired me last year and they were like, we've not never been to the Hills. And I was like, whoa, we got to change that. So, I basically looked again, the issues drive everything. I was like, okay, these are their four priorities. These not only are the congressional members that represent these people, those are not just the people that we need to see. We need to talk to the committee staff, the committees, because the committees are looking at some of these issues. The committees are made up of members from around the country. So we get beyond just our offices. So that should be built into it. So if the committees have an issue of interest before them, you probably want to weigh in. And actually, they're really happy to see you come in. I was told this by a Senate committee. We went in to do some higher education work about 2 years ago, and they said, "We are so glad that you came in because you came in with life stories. Only thing we see is a spreadsheet with numbers that represent people. So we don't see we don't see the real life story. We're just like, okay, we see the numbers and the data says this, okay, but we took in students, and these were actually Latino students from California we took in. They told their story about the experience somewhere of being in the country and the opportunity for higher education. And it was really, really interesting. So that really turned things around in terms of how the committee was looking at an issue that we cared about. And I'm gonna tell you what it turned around. They ended up putting more funding in this program as a result of that. So I say, you start with your local folks, but you got to get further than that. You want to get into the committees in the House and Senate side. Agencies are critical if you're going to be applying for any grants. And I was on my nonprofit education board last night. We had a meeting, and I was just telling them, they said, well, we want to have this grant through the Navy. We want to do this. I said, we have to get to know the people that have the money. Those
Yes.
are the program managers. We've got to get to know those program directors and managers in these agencies. It does a couple of things for you. It lets you know, yes, what we're trying to do is aligning with where the money is,
Mm-hmm.
or it's not. How do we change or adjust our strategy, our plan, so that we are in the best position to compete for those dollars? Those people give you the answers. So that you can be a small nonprofit, you can be huge, you can be a huge university. They will talk to anyone that's seeking their assistance, and they'll give you honest. They don't have a dog in the fight, so they're going to give you honest feedback too. And
Yeah.
we use agencies for that. Sometimes we have a grand idea, but it's really not what they're looking to invest in. And so maybe we need to pivot to something else that accomplishes our goal, that's aligned with their goals and their missions too.
Win-wins.
Yes,
Win-win.
win, you hit it on the head.
Yeah.
Win-win, Sabrina.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that the scarcity mindset that nonprofits have
Mhm.
also, they have to go beyond that because I can already hear Will's telling, well, we're a small nonprofit. How are we going to take people to DC? You just do it. You know, that made a difference for me.
Yep.
Getting kids, I mean, I did youth development,
Right.
getting kids to DC,
Mhm.
setting up meeting,
Yeah.
taking them in, getting to meet with the Congress. They get to take pictures with kids from their district.
Yes.
That's what you have to do. And
Exactly.
that's it.
No, that's
So
and at the end of the day, I always tell people, what's the story? What is our story today? We can give them all the facts and all that, but how can we create a compelling story? They love good storytelling. And I'll tell you, sometimes they'll go in and say, well, God, this means, and staff will come and knock on the door, sir, it's time for you to leave. Well, no, 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 I want to hear one more thing from these folks. So yeah, you have to be able to, and you can't really tell the story by just emailing. It's
right.
not the same thing. You need to be face to face, eye to eye, and talking to these people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said, bringing youth and bringing students. I have one of my clients. I was in Michigan 3 weeks ago, and they said, "Oh my God, we're bringing students back." I was like, "Yeah, because they care to hear from the students. They can take pictures. They don't want to take a picture with me. They
Exactly.
like you too, but those students, that's what they're really after." So
That's what they're after. They can put that in their newsletter and
that's
send it
right.
out on their mailers and do
That's
all
right.
that. And it's great. You tell in on the marketing piece of it too, and
That's
that's
right.
how you do it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about public, private partnerships.
Hmm.
You've worked with diverse sectors. Can you share examples of successful, public-private partnerships between small nonprofits and the federal government, and how these collaborations can be initiated and sustained?
Yeah. So I'm working on one actually in our home state with a city and a housing authority. I think they bought a university, and basically they need to do a transformation of a community. Of course, it's a community of color.
Hmm.
If you start to think about that, there's been disinvestment in housing, food deserts, all those kinds of things. So about 2, 3 years ago, we said, what resources on the federal level could we access to start to plan for this transformation? So it was the consultants. I think it was a city, it was a housing authority. I think there was a bank involved. There was a financial institution involved, and so we put all that together. And the key thing was that putting the collaboration together, and someone's not going to get more out of it than any other. We're all in this together. So we were singing from the same sheet of music. And so through that, we would have weekly meetings putting together this grant proposal to HUD. We found funding at the Housing and Urban Development Agency. And so basically we waited and waited, submitted a grant. We, on top of that, because we had that collaboration, we had members of Congress willing to support us. They were willing to write letters. They were willing to call people at HUD to say, hey, we know we can't tell you to grant it, but this is an amazing project. We just want you to give it the fullest consideration that you could. Okay, down the road, 3 months later, yay, we got the planning grant, $400,000. So now that has positioned us to seek, I think, about a 40 or $50 million implementation grant. I say all that to say, without those partners, nonprofits in the community that are dealing with youth, workforce,
Hmm.
housing, private sector, higher education, military. Let me
Right.
say, the military is supporting this too. Without that collaboration, you don't
Right.
even get the planning. Therefore, you can't even anticipate competing for for the big 50, 40, $50 million grant. So that was one that I've worked on that had serious collaboration. Another that's more community based, but in higher education. So I work with community college that does training. They're training aviation maintenance technicians. So we were able to leverage their partnership with Delta Airlines.
Okay.
In doing that, think about if you're going for training money or legislation to authorize more training money in Washington. Who's a better partner? They actually believe that you are training their workforce. So if you got Delta there with you, I sort of think members of Congress are going to pay attention to that.
Right.
So that was one that's been very helpful to us too. So you often look at what are the public-private partnerships that we can form with multiple entities. And I think sometimes the more the better. You don't want to get to the point where it's unwieldy, where you have two, and it's like, okay, you're just bringing people to the
Right.
dais to have a long list. You want to be strategic about that. Who are ones that align with this, that someone's going to look at on paper and say, oh man, this is impressive. Okay, let's move on. How can we help you?
Right.
That's where you want to get with those partnerships. And sometimes, it depends too. I think we can all sometimes get into a fight over who gets the money. And I've had clients do that. It's
Yeah.
like you're not seeing the forest for the trees. let's not fight about that, because the worst
Let's
thing,
get the money first.
the money, yeah, and the thing about it is members don't want they that will drive them nuts. If you
Yeah.
want to do something that really hurts you, if you're fighting over money, that would be harmful. And I'll be honest, I had a coalition, nonprofit coalition at one point, brought them to Washington. We all sit in a room, strategy, we were prepared. And well, who's going to get, how much are they going to get? And I was like, guys, this is not good. We're going to the hill as one. You can't get in worried about this. And it destroyed the partnership, because it was a lot of backbiting. Like, are they going to get more? Are they going okay, we don't want to do unless we get this amount. And it destroyed what would have been a good opportunity. And this was nonprofit, higher education, and they blew it because
Right.
they were fighting over the money before we even went to the hill. And it showed in the meetings that they
Yeah.
weren't together.
If
So
they weren't together, and you when you're doing these collaborations and partnerships, and
mhm,
I've done these, sometimes you're not going to be the one to get all the money, but it's okay. The
right.
alternative would have been you would have got zero.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's okay, and sometimes you take one for the team.
Right.
It is okay.
Yeah.
So
And I had a client that just went through that just last year. You know, we had them, a county, a city, and I think it was the military partner or something. And the money went, and economic development group. So the money, it was an earmark. So the money went to the economic development because it was for job growth, workforce development, economic development. And one of the partners was like, well, that wasn't really for us. We're like, whoa, the people that live in your community are going to benefit. What are you talking about? Your name was on this. No, you're not going to directly receive it, but there's a benefit. And I said, please don't call the members and talk to their staff. You see them around, so well, that really wasn't for. Thanks for getting that, but really wasn't for. That's going to make us look pretty bad that we sold it as a partnership. So
yes,
it's all those kinds of things. You never know who those folks are talking to. You have to be very careful about what you're saying in out in public, in
right,
terms of your work, because if the wrong stuff gets back, and I've been in this situation, they will shut you down.
right.
They'll
And
take your
all
meeting from being
wins
not.
are not monetary wins.
That's exactly right.
So, you're getting community awareness. People follow success.
That's
Your
right.
organization is looking success. How are you
Mhm.
going to leverage that for individual donations? It's all about leveraging.
That's
And
right.
so look at it from that lens as
Right.
opposed to the monetary lens.
And that's a great point, because even up here, I don't always, if people, I want to get all this money, I'm like, we can do more. We can raise your profile. We can get you in rooms that where you build partnerships that may not get you a federal check. Maybe it gets you a state check. Maybe it gets you more awareness about your. Maybe it gets you more donations.
Right.
Those kinds of things. So don't look at it as a zero sum game. Well, I went to Y and I talked. I didn't get any money. Well, there are things that are built along the way that can help you that are not monetary. Sometimes I have clients that get to serve on these national committees. As a matter of fact, we're trying to get one to serve on Kamala Harris as the vice president's new gun safety commission. That would really be good when your community is being ravaged by gun violence every day. I think that would be a good
Yeah.
thing. That you're in
It
the room.
positions you as an expert,
That's right.
and
Exactly.
that's credibility.
That's right.
And then you leverage that credibility for
That's
your nonprofit organization.
bingo. Bingo. Exactly.
But yeah, I get you. I get you. So let's talk about policy.
Hmm.
So small nonprofits often advocate for specific policy changes, and you
Hmm.
just brought up one. But what strategies have you seen work best in influencing policy decisions at the federal level, particularly for organizations focused on areas like education, workforce development, or economic development?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And those are all the areas that I work in. So typically, if there's a big issue that's affecting, say, a majority of nonprofits, the best way to move something like that is you all have to be together. So you try to get as many people as possible that are impacted by this, and maybe look at it whether it's locally, then statewide, then nationally. For instance, as I was saying, I'm working on this supportive housing and wraparound services and human services thing is tied to Medicaid. We don't get that for my one county client alone. So we had already started working with people in Massachusetts, people all over the country. So usually I can tell you on big policy issues. And sometimes you can look out, there could be a one-off where it's something that really specifically helps you and your members willing to go to bat. So maybe he says, well, you know what? Or she says, they have a bill coming through. give me the language that you need to change whatever you need, and I'll try to get it put in. That does happen. Typically, when you do that, though, you have to have other partners to
Right.
affect something like that. When it comes around, I've seen in education, workforce, and economic development, it's been national advocacy that gets that done. And the other thing, there are organizations in Washington that specifically advocate on workforce development
Right.
or economic development and education. So those are groups that you might want to tab. You could do a web search that said federal advocates for workforce development. They'll pop up. And
Right.
those people are really willing to talk to you. Now, some of them want you to pay to be members, but honestly, they're also looking for allies too. So there's a win-win there.
Right.
They might be like, oh my God, thanks for calling me nonprofit A. Will you sign on this? Can you get your members to sign on? Because if you get your people on, he's on that committee, we can then do this. So that's how you move those kinds of things. So you can look at it as going to your members specifically. But typically they're going to say, hey, Sabrina, who else? What other states, what other members are interested in this? Because they don't want to be on an island by themselves. So typically they know there's power in numbers.
Right.
And so they're going to, the first thing they're probably going to say is, who else are you talking to in your sphere that would have these issues? Okay, so someone in Arizona, let me talk to the folks in there. So I know this staffer who works here or there. We're going to have a conversation about this. It typically starts that way. But I would
Okay.
say you want to sort of, as much as you can, look nationally at getting help on those kinds of big issues.
That's good information. So I have one more question. I see there's two comments. I don't know what they are, but I'm going to look at them. But so keeping up with federal policies and
Mhm.
regulations is essential.
Yep.
But what resources or tools would you recommend for small nonprofits to stay informed about changes that could impact their work and funding opportunities as well?
Yeah, so they're really highly expensive tools, some of which I use that nonprofits probably don't want to. And those are more on the political side of these big issues of whether it's the strike in Michigan and the impact of that, or if the Biden administration is producing some policy thing. I would say one of the things, again, these are the things that I'm interested in. So based on those, these are the two that based on what your issue areas are, that will probably dictate the tools that you're going to use. And again, based if you're a nonprofit in the youth development sector, I would want to find out what the organizations that are advocating for those things nationally, some of which are located in Washington, because they typically have newsletters. They have great websites. And what you want to do is once you can make those connections, they usually have what you would say advocacy of policy links on their website. You
Okay.
want to hit those because typically in their newsletters and under those policy links, they're going to be telling you these are the big issues that we're looking at. And so that will give you an idea of, yeah, maybe I want to follow this group. Oh, no, I don't want to follow them. I want to follow this group. But those are essentially the tools. And again, as I said, congress.gov is a good place. So if you are hearing, hey, they're trying to pass a bill on this particular thing, let me look up and search by the topic. The
Okay.
regulations are a little bit harder. Well, they're typically, again, those are noticed in Federal Register. But if there's regulations at the IRS that's going to come down, and you might want to pay attention to the IRS website. I mean,
Right.
they have policy and they have news and they have regulations and things that they're going to do. So you probably want to choose the federal agencies that are connected to the work that you're doing. Follow those websites, and typically they will have links that tie you back to policies, what's coming down the pipe, or something that they're doing. But again, and then if you see something that's very troublesome, you can contact them, but your members can do that for you too.
Right.
So you can call your person in the House and Congress and say, hey, I'm here and IRS is going, this is devastating. And we do that kind of work.
Right.
Let's have you write to the Secretary of the Treasury or the IRS director, say, hey, look, um, this is bad. So those are really the ways now. And then I'll be honest with you, on the Hill, staff can be your best friends when you do the work for them.
Right.
So, you can't call them and say, hey, write me a letter.
It's
You,
like, yeah, when you ask for a letter, write it. They'll
you
sign
have
it.
to write it. Yeah. So that you got to think of those kinds of things. And the same thing with funding. If there are funding programs that you're interested in, I'm talking about overall programmatic
Hmm.
funding. You may want your boss, or you may want to write a letter saying, hey, we need this account to be funded up at the Department of Labor because it supports X, Y, and Z. and then you could send a draft letter and let them do, or talking points. Talking points work well too,
Yeah.
because sometimes they just want to call an agency and say, hey, I heard from my constituent, this is happening. Shed some light. What's going on with this? So, because some of them may not want to write, they may want to just have a conversation.
Right.
So you sort of want to ask whatever they need. You want to get them, because at the end of the day, you're asking them to do some work for you. So let's make their job as easy as possible. So
Yeah.
I never call and ask members to write letters or doing that stuff without giving them a draft. I mean,
Right.
but there are lobbyists in Washington that do, because I hear about it and they'll say, these people came here want us to do all, man,
Yeah.
you always send me the talking points, the fact sheets, and you send me the letter. I was like, yeah, I want you to help me, man.
Right. So even on the local level, guys, if you're asking your local, your
Yes.
mayors and your state rep, send them the letter, and
Yes.
give them a starter at least, and they'll go from there. They're too busy, right?
Yeah. And I can vouch for that. I worked on the local level, worked for a vice mayor and a county super in California. So I can tell you in San Diego that, yeah, and people come in lobbyists, and even on the local level, the ones that really, really got us to do work for them, effective work, were the people that produced information that we could use to advocate.
Yes.
I mean, because we
Yes.
can't pull it out of the sky.
Right.
So, you have to be able to produce those kinds of things. So yes.
If no one else took anything from this, that is such a good point right there. You've given us so many nuggets, but that's
You're
a
welcome.
good point right there. Something that's in your control that you
Mhm.
can do to advance your cause. Is
Right.
not just sit with the hand out, give them a draft or something to
That's
go
right.
on.
That's right. And the
So
other thing I would say too is, and I always tell my clients this, sometimes we'll go in, instead of asking, we're like, how can we be a resource to you? Oh my God, I want to issue this policy paper on this. Can you guys help us with some content? Because then that creates a two-way. It's like, okay, they just don't come asking all the time. They're a resource. So if a bill comes up, man, it'd be great for, hey, I'm going to call the executive director of XYZ nonprofit. They can help me. So you want to get to that point too, where you can be, and always offer, say, how can we help you? How can we be a resource on these issues to you? And the other thing is, don't give up when they don't respond. And let me say, and I've got to want to be clear about this. Times have changed with the younger generation. We have kids, and mine like to communicate via text, via email, not so much on the phone. I was a phone guy. And
yeah,
so I've had to get used to, well, Mr. Hamm, can you leave it? Can you leave your email address, or can you take theirs? They don't really respond by phone, which I'm not happy about, but that's the world we live in these days. So don't get, and a lot of young people work on Capitol Hill.
yes,
So their urgency is not the urgency of a 50-plus-year-old guy like me.
yes,
So you have to be patient, and sometimes you have to be persistent, and you have to call them. So, my theory is, I'll give you something, I'll give you 24 hours. Haven't heard, so I'm going to nudge again. If I don't get you, if you don't 48, then I will pick up the phone and call, because you're not reading my email. And so typically that, and sometimes they're very apologetic. Hey, I've just been overwhelmed. I'm very sorry about this. For the most part, luckily with the folks I work for, knock on wood, they respond, but don't be discouraged by them not responding to you immediately. There are lots of people contacting these folks
yes,
about various things, a lot which are beyond their control. So
yes.
just be patient and persistent is what I.
Yes, patience and persistence, and that is something that you can carry with you across
That's right.
fundraising.
That's right.
Across fundraising.
Yes,
Let me
even
just
to
say that.
private people you reach out to, and I have to call and ask for money, investments. I like to say, ask
I
people
like
to
to say
invest in
investments too.
organization. Yeah, and you have to be persistent and patient,
Yeah,
about those things. It's not that they don't like what you're doing, but you have to work. Once you capture their attention, you will be fine. But don't give up. You can't give up.
that is great, great point. So I'm checking out the Q&A. I do have some comments for you,
Okay.
but if anybody has a specific question, go ahead and put it in here, because at this point, we are over our time, because I promised 45 minutes ish, but a lot of people always have questions about fundraising. So if you do have questions about fundraising, you can visit my website at www.supportingworldhope.com. Um, Renee, Renee, I'm not sure if I should say where you work, but he works at a university here. He says it's very relevant information. that they'll be visiting DC in November for a conference. So they're
Mhm.
going to be taking the things that you said and
Okay.
putting it into practice here. And
Great.
then Gabrielle, Henderson Love also made a comment around an excellent question that was asked in the way that you answered it. So this is very relevant. Oh, Renee said, sure, I can say the university. So he works for the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, my alma mater.
Okay.
Although at the time when I graduated from there, that's how old I am, it was UT Pan Am. And he
Okay.
works with the Latinos in heritage conservation. So they're going to be visiting for Pass Forward. So maybe y'all can develop a relationship and see. Ron, it would be great to get you down to the Rio Grande Valley, Texas, where I live at.
Oh, I would love to do that, and absolutely. And the other thing with Renee, I work, the university I work with is a Hispanic serving institution, which I would think is in California. So I'm very familiar with the issues that they face, and then I do higher education work overall. So yes, absolutely, I would love to come down and visit and speak with folks and tour and that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's plan on that.
We should plan that, guys, because Ron officially is my last guest for my Sipping Tea series for 2023.
Mhm.
And I said, how will I share this information? I said, I'm going to share it at the end. He happens to be my cousin,
Yeah.
and he's very good at his job. I
Thank you.
trust I could not get someone at his caliber if it was not a family relationship at this point. He
Yeah.
is good,
Yeah.
very good at what he does. And
Yeah.
I'm so proud and happy that you agreed to come and share
Oh yeah.
your knowledge with my audience. So,
Yeah, no, you're
um,
doing great work, and I always, when I get offers to present and be in front of people, I always think about what's the mission and what you're really trying to do. You're doing the work of the people on the ground, and that's very important. I always tell people, all this stuff, if it doesn't happen on the ground, forget Washington. You have to be delivering on the ground. So no, I'm proud of what you've done and the work that you've done. I've seen your numbers and what you're doing. Like I said, you're going to have to help me with my foundation. We need you to step in. So I'll be working on that for you as well too.
thank you, thank you, thank you. And Renee is already trying to connect with you. He said you got to visit the Rio Grande Valley and in the winter or springtime, because I'm
Okay.
telling you right now, it is still triple digits outside
Hmm.
and it's hot. But
Yeah.
we have a great community, and I happen to also serve on the Economic Development Corporation board for
Okay.
my city. So
Okay.
Renee, we're gonna make this happen.
Yes.
We will make it happen. So but thank you again so much. I'm gonna say one thing as we part, and then I'll let you have the last word. So
Mhm.
the next big thing that I have coming up is the Build a Thriving Nonprofit Summit is happening October the 24th through the 27th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the registration will be in the comments after all of this. And I like to say that your mission matters and deserves to be highlighted in your community. Your mission matters and can be an inspiration to those who need it the most. Your mission matters and deserves to be funded at its fullest capacity. And with that, Ron, I'd like you to have the last word.
Thank you, Sabrina. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. This is one of the fun things that I get to do in this job, is to talk to people, and enlighten them about how this process works. And if they can take anything from it to advance, your goals, your missions within your nonprofits, then I'm happy. I've done my job. And so the only thing I will ask, is this recorded? Do you
Yes, it
record these?
is.
Oh, great, 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 great. So I appreciate that. I might even, I'll put it in my library or access it later. But again, as I would say to everyone, it is important to establish relationships. It's important to build those relationships, nurture them, and then it's really important to put in effective strategies for advocacy, in all your communications. So, whether it's you're using your social media face to face, I think you can use a combination of things in today's world to be successful. So don't be shy and don't be afraid to ask. If you don't, you can't. If you don't get in the game, you can never win. Is how I say it. So leave politics out of it and just think about you're in it for policy and to make impact on people's lives. And with that, that will be it for me. And again, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Sabrina. I really appreciate it. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you. It's very helpful. And that's Sipping Tea with Sabrina. And we will see you the next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye bye.